Hi, this is Parent Coach Janet Bonnin of Fine-Tuned Families, welcoming you to another great conversation for busy parents. We created Wise Parents, Wise Kids as a way to help you parent smarter. Fine-Tuned Families is on the web at www.finetunedfamilies.com. When you visit the website, you can connect with us via LinkedIn, Twitter, and our Facebook community. This is Parent Coach Janet Bonnin of Fine-Tuned Families, welcoming you to our next show, our second in a series of 2 shows here just north of San Antonio. Also visiting with us today is Angela Woodrow, parent advocate and project navigator. Hi, Angie. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Janet.
I'm so excited that we have Karen Aitken back as our guest for our second part of the series on learning styles. Karen is a fantastic Texas teacher and the founder of a company called Classroom Management Specialists. Karen is a veteran educator and has developed training programs in the areas of classroom management, character building, and techniques for dealing with bullying. Karen has published several articles on these subjects and a workbook for classroom management titled Building Custom Kids. She has also authored several short stories and is working on self-publishing a children's book. Welcome back, Karen.
Thank you. Very happy to be a guest today.
So glad to have you back. Our first interview series with Karen Aitken and myself, Janet Bonnin, and Angela Woodrow was fantastic. We were looking at the different types of learning styles, and then we dove into some specific questions around how to figure out what our preferred learning styles are and what our kids' preferred learning styles are. Karen, would you like to just do a quick summary of the 3 types of learning styles again for us?
I sure would. There are 3 types of learning, which is the visual learners, auditory, and tactile, which is known as kinesthetic. Auditory learners work best when able to hear information and prefer verbal instructions. Visual learners are most effective at retaining information when able to see instruction in written words or in illustrations. And kinesthetic learners work best with activities that are hands-on.
And in our last interview, Karen pointed us to a couple of websites that help us assess our preferred learning styles. And Karen, do you have that handy that you could just repeat those 2 websites again?
I sure do. There's www.ehow.com.education, and there's one that has interactive 20 questions, and it will assess your learning style for you. It is www.educationplanner.org/learning styles.
So that's educationplanner.org/learning styles, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, is there something you'd like to maybe point out here? I know that sometimes after we finish an interview, like the one that we just had, that some additional comments come to mind. And is there something overarching that you might like to share with our listeners?
Well, I shared last time the story of a little boy in my class that was having a hard time paying attention. And he became aware that he had this problem, and I was giving it a lesson, and we were sitting on the floor. He was holding his eyes wide open. I asked him what he was doing, and he said, I'm paying attention. And then when he went back to his seat and tried to do the work, he started crying, and we went in the hall, and he said, I don't know what to do. I can't pay attention. Mm-hmm. And I told him, I said, because just sitting and looking isn't the way you learn. That's not working for you. So there is another way that you, as a person, learns best. So we worked on trying to find his learning style. And after having that conversation, a couple of days later, he was sitting on the floor, and he got up and he said, I know what to do for the first part, but I didn't get the last part. And I said, wow, you know that about yourself. That's amazing. And I sent him in the hall with a peer facilitator, another student, and she explained to him, and he came back in, and he was able to go back and complete his task. But what I see most is a student that was feeling dumb and was feeling like his self-esteem was very low because he started to understand, I'm not dumb, I'm smart, I just learn differently. And given the tools and the self-awareness to understand what works best for himself, it just raised his self-esteem. And now I see more and more success for him. He's just doing better and better.
How beautiful. That's a wonderful story. So it really turned around his own self-image, his image of himself and what he saw as a student.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you also do a great job of encouraging the students to support and encourage and help each other, too.
Well, that's that safe learning environment, that in order to have students be able to feel their best and find out what works best for them, they need to know that they will be respected by their peers and their teacher, and it's a growing and learning process, and that's what they need in order to be their best.
So would you be willing to explain a little bit more about that, about the safe learning environment?
In my classroom, I tell them that respect is earned, not given, and we earn it by being respectful of each other, that I think it's very important with children, with students, that they know that you love them, because if their emotional tanks are full, you're able to correct behavior without tearing down self-esteem. It is also very important in that they know that when they make mistakes, their peers are not going to disrespect them, that they can have a bad day, but still, by being accountable and learning from it, they can go on and have a really good day. I think it's just very important that in a classroom environment that they know that their teacher cares about them as an individual and is trying to reach them and help them be the best and understand themselves and what works best for them.
Sounds fantastic. And I want to say that from personal experience, one of my sons was lucky enough to have Karen as a teacher several years back, and he loved being in her classroom, just loved it.
And I enjoyed him.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So, Karen, last time we were also talking a little bit about how parents can craft a home study environment that encourages success, and then talking about some specific steps that parents can take to set up a homework station that complements my child's learning style. So in one of those two areas, if you'd like to go back into talking about crafting a home study environment, summarize that, then we can move on.
Absolutely. I think even as teachers, we've evolved a lot in our thinking and what's best for students. When we think back about when we were students and we sat in a desk all day and the teacher talked and you opened the book and you just did whatever you were told to do, we're realizing that as children change and grow, there's many different ways that we can create in our classroom a way of learning that reaches all of our students. And it's not where you have to create a separate lesson plan for individual students, or it is not a way of watering down curriculum for some students. What it is providing different learning options or paths which help students make sense of their skills and concepts that they need.
And what would an example of that be? Could you kind of lay that out a little bit? Something that would, let's say, a typical lesson that, or maybe a series of typical lessons that focus and move through the various learning styles.
We were recently studying communities. So in order to try to reach all the different kinds of learning styles with that, there would be the part where we discussed the different communities using visual, using the book and the text, the illustrations, the captions that went with it. There was also opportunity for students to get in different groups and discuss at one table urban communities, at another table suburban, where they were talking to each other and explaining what they had learned. And then we had them in group projects so that they were doing hands-on and creating large posters and having all the certain different elements of a community in their posters and using collaboration among their peers. And we felt like that was a very meaningful overall lesson because it did cover visual and auditory and kinesthetic. So we were reaching all the learning styles.
And as a parent whose kids went through some of those type of projects, I can tell you my children always enjoyed those projects and learned a great deal from it. Got a lot of satisfaction out of doing it that way also. That's wonderful.
Well, as a third grade teacher, the most meaningful thing to me is at the end of the year, they just felt like the year was the best year they've had, because I want them to have a lot of different experiences that we do. Actually, when we learn poetry, we don't just write poems. We don't just get up and read poems. We have a whole celebration, a coffeehouse poetry celebration, where we get up and have music and share poetry and have a lot of movement and activity with it. It's just a way of making learning really meaningful and fun at the same time.
Fantastic.
And that's magical, that you have the space and you get the time with the child in the classroom environment to set that up. How can a parent who is juggling putting dinner on the table, folding laundry, and the 15 other things that are always happening in what I lovingly call the hurricane hour? I mean, I can remember when my kids were growing up. We had the kitchen table, and we were in one of our houses. We move around a lot. One of our houses, it was more like an open floor plan. And my kids loved that house, and here's why. Because the dining room table was to the left, and it was set up to have food on. And the kitchen table, which was closer to me in the kitchen and where I was cooking and trying to get dinner done, was where homework was. So I suddenly had this vision and this realization, they need space to get stuff done, because I thought, well, you just sit down at the table and you don't make a mess and you get your homework done so I can set the table and, make a dinner. When I clicked on that and realized that just like in the classroom, the kids have lots of space to move around, and I have to acknowledge and allow that space for learning where they want to be, which is next to me because they haven't seen me all day. We changed our bar counter so that the kids could, push up the stools and be at the counter working on things so that we could have conversations while I was cooking or, folding or whatever I had to be doing the laundry or whatever.
So that's great, yeah.
I realized after coming home from spending time in their classroom with them, of course they loved their classroom. There was plenty of space, and we were in this little house, and I was trying to keep all these different nice dining table and, teach them their manners. And I realized, okay, we'll get the manners, but what we need is the space for them to lay out their books and do their projects and, have access to markers and crayons and, so that their creativity would stimulate them and help them get their homework done in a more effective manner. So, but I know that's a problem for parents. Where do you put all that stuff that kids have to have in order to, quote, do homework,
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
support their learning styles.
Well, and, the thing, too, like we had mentioned last time with the auditory learners, having them read out loud while you're cooking, have them read out loud to you, or and then we talked about the Wispy phone that you can purchase on the Internet or at teacher stores that helps them read to themselves. that is something that definitely helps them because it helps them focus. Now, for your kinesthetic learners at home, you can get really creative, having them jump rope while they're spelling their spelling words. Put some shaving cream on the counter and have them, with the shaving cream on a counter, have them write out their vocabulary words. Because if the learning is in a fun way, it helps the learning to stick. They say for children, the way that our right brain works, for children, for learning to stick, they need to make connections to that learning. And if they're in the element of their preferred learning style, it's going to be even more meaningful.
Sounds fantastic.
So setting up a space, and I love that idea. I mean, shaving cream, that's no harm, no foul on a kitchen counter or on a table.
Oh, yeah, easy to clean up. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Even on a placemat, or you put the laminate trays down on the table and just load it up with the cream, so the shaving cream, and then you just clean it up. That's a great idea. So,
I used to make homemade Play-Doh, too, and use that for them to create things with. If they were learning about landforms, I'd make Play-Doh and have them create the different landforms with the Play-Doh. So it's just, using your imagination a little bit and just trying something a little different that makes it fun and meaningful for the kids.
Wonderful.
That's perfect. Now, what about the child that really does need it quiet? What would you recommend for a parent so that there's no distractions? How can they do that when the home environment can be kind of crazy, especially if there's siblings at home?
Well, at school, I even have that situation. I might have a classroom of students working on a project where they're talking, and then one student needs to be working on something that he requires it to be quiet. So all I do is I give him a set of headphones and have him sit in a comfy chair with the headphones and a clipboard, and he's able to concentrate and work on what he's doing, and takes that focus of whatever else is going on in the classroom off of him, takes that stress off of him, and he can just sit there and focus on what he needs to do. And a lot of times, once students know that about themselves, they don't even tell me. They know they have something to work on, they need it quiet, they'll go get a set of headphones and put them on. So again, once they have that confidence in what works for them, they're able to even, help themselves to what they need.
So it sounds like, too, in the home environment, then, once we as parents understand what types of preferred learning styles our kids are operating in at the moment, that we can get perhaps even a kit together that has certain things in it.
Yes.
For the kinesthetic learner, maybe, like you said, the shaving cream, if you're okay with having that in there. For the person who needs the quiet and is maybe a visual learner, but they need not to have so many distractions, maybe they just have a pair of headphones in their little homework station, homework kit, something like that.
Right, and for the visual learner, charts that they can write out their information on and flashcards they can create that help them to be able to retain what they've learned and what they need to learn. And really, it's not complex. It's just keeping it simple but effective. Things that will actually work and help them.
So simple, effective, and fun, right? As fun as you can make it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, go ahead, Janet.
Okay, I suppose I would imagine it also helps, as you said in the last interview, to involve your son or daughter or the student, whichever way we're looking at this, in helping set up their homework stations and helping decide what goes in their kits.
Well, it gives them that feeling of being a participant in making decisions for themselves. I think for them to gain that independence and ownership of learning, they also need to feel like they've had a part in the contract of what needs to be done. And even in school, we do that as well, because for students we want to create students that become independent learners. They understand the purpose of what they need to do. why they need to do it, and then they start taking that ownership for it. And that's that kind of buy-in where you're going to see greater success, because if they feel like they've had a part in it, they're going to be more committed to it.
That's fantastic.
Great.
And so really, it just comes down to the fact that the parent, if we did a call to action to help them be more successful with homework at home during that hurricane hour, the first thing that the parent needs to do is identify their child's learning styles. It doesn't hurt that the parent take the assessment as well, so that they are informed about their learning styles if they aren't aware of them. And then the second thing that the parent and the child should do is have a conversation. What do you want to do? How do you want? Where do you want to sit? And then the parent and the child build that homework station kit. Put the tools in the laundry basket or the whatever. One of my daughters growing up was visual, and we just got one of those nicer wooden easels, you know, the art easels and things, and put that in the corner. And it was her homework station, but it was also where people put things like, don't forget to, you know, pick up the dry cleaning, you know, so the information station, you know, and homework station has multi-purpose. And both my daughters are grown now, and they both have an information station that's an easel in their house. So they grew up with that, and they translated that. So that's interesting. So
that also became a beloved family tradition, it sounds like, Angela.
It did. And we as a family, we all love to play that Pictionary game, you know, where you draw the pictures and you guess and so it's it just comes down to it. If you build it, they will come, you know. So
and so, Karen, something else that comes to mind for me, and I can attest to this in my own family, the learning styles of each of my children is different, the preferred learning style. So that would mean that when you have multiple children, you need to figure out the preferred learning style for each of them, and then design a homework station or a homework setup that complements that particular son or daughter's learning style, right?
I think that would absolutely set them on the way to success.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And I would have to say the siblings often end up playing with each other's tools for their learning style.
Well, and it gives them an opportunity to see if that is also another style that might work well for them too.
Yes.
Which is great. Now, I have a question that I would love to go to here, because I thought of this as a parent, and it's something that Angie and I were curious about. What if, as a parent, my preferred learning style is different from that of one of my children's learning styles, and it causes issues? It causes us to have some friction between us. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yes. Well, when that happens, I think that it's the self-awareness. Oftentimes parents think what worked for them should work for their kid. And it doesn't always work that way, because the way that you learn as an individual can be greatly different from the way that your child learns. And I think that there needs to be a compromise. There needs to be a compromise and understanding that just sitting at the table with the paper and pencil in hand may not be the way your child does their best, not at this stage and age. It may be that as they get older and mature, they'll be more capable of learning that way. But in the meantime, it may be that they need to be on the floor. It may be that they need to be in a quiet room, or they may need to be music in the background. But again, as a parent, we need to be able to understand that for our child to be successful, we have to understand what works for them.
Mm-hmm. And so we're also, as parents, then being called to release the need for a homework environment to look or feel or be a certain way.
Well, if you step into most classrooms today, you'll find that they, too, have made those compromises. Classrooms today do not look necessarily like classrooms used to look. You'll come in and find kids working on the floor, some working at their desks, some in the hall working and doing things. So we have found that flexibility of learning styles actually makes our job easier too, because you're going to get more success across the board if you're meeting more needs of students.
Well, and that facilitates a greater love of learning, doesn't it?
It certainly does, because then they're eager to come and learn and go to school. I'm sorry. What you want to do is move past the level of frustration that a lot of students feel when they feel like, I'm not being successful like my peers. I'm not getting the grades or the praise that they're getting because it's not working for me. What they need to understand is that they are smart too. They just learn differently. And that's where it comes to play, that you have to help them. You have to guide and help them find out, what is the way that you learn? What is the way that we can find that level of success in you and confidence that builds your self-esteem?
So I would imagine also, even for energetic young men and women, students, that as self-esteem goes up and a love of learning goes up, behavior issues and any kind of negative behaviors drops, right?
Well, and that's just common sense, because if children are feeling good about what they do and how they're doing, there's less chance or desire for them to cause problems or be in trouble, because oftentimes that is a compensation for frustration.
Right. All right. So I think that this has been such a wonderful conversation. Karen, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask and see if there were some closing comments that you would like to share, or if there might be some suggestions that you have for the listeners.
Well, I would just suggest for parents to take the time to go online and find those assessments to find out their learning style and their child's learning style, and make it a fun project at home at incorporating those types of materials that are going to help your child. Have conversations with your child about how they feel best in learning, what they are most comfortable with. And as your child is becoming more and more successful, just understand that as they grow and mature, their style may adapt and change at different levels as well. But I just want to encourage them to try some of the approaches and things that we talked about, and to just have fun with learning with their child.
Thank you so much, Karen, for being willing to talk to us. And if anybody wanted to reach you or had some questions, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Well, I have an email address, which is buildingcustomkids@yahoo.com.
So again, buildingcustomkids@yahoo.com.
Yes, and I check that daily, so if anybody would like further information or would like to leave me a message, I would be more than happy to respond.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, Karen, and thank you, Angela, for being part of this wonderful conversation.
I loved it. It was fantastic. It was a great conversation, and I'm really fired up about helping parents get more info on the go to be able to parent smarter.
And thank you for having me as a guest.
You're very welcome. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for listening in. Thank you again, Karen Aitken and Angela Woodrow, for being part of all this and for the wisdom that you've shared on learning styles. That wraps up another great conversation for busy parents. This is Parent Coach Janet Bonnin thanking you for joining us today on Wise Parents, Wise Kids, an interview series with experts who help you parent smarter. Learn more about Fine-Tuned Families by visiting us on the web and connecting with us through LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. If you want more information on today's conversation, go to www.finetunedfamilies.com, click the Get Help Now tab, and enter the name of today's topic. I'll be happy to send you the link to this recording, PowerPoint notes on the call, and links to the resources we discussed on the call.